All right, how are you going? It's so good to see you. Oh, it is. I'm feeling a lot better than I was last time I recorded. It's taken me a little while to get there, but yes, I'm feeling significantly better. Almost 100%. Cheers. Got a tea. Have you got a tea? Let's go. We're going to talk about some news. Now, there's quite a lot of news, little bits and pieces. There are a few headlines, one of them being to do with Sigma and Z-mount lenses. Another to do with the fact that Nikon's international warranties have changed. I don't think we should all worry about that too much. I've heard some worry. I'm not sure why there's so much worry. And a few other bits of news as well. So let's jump into news. Our dear friends at Nikon Rumours have shared a quote from the CEO of Sigma in regards to making lenses for third parties to them, of course. The CEO of Sigma is Kazuto Yamaki, hopefully I said that correctly. It's true that the photography market has been systematically shrinking for years, in keeping with more and more people simply using smartphones to make photos and videos. Less cameras sold also means less potential customers interested in buying a lens, which is why our short-term strategy indeed involves a possibility of introducing lenses to new mounts, to such photography systems as Nikon Z or Canon EOS R. So far, however, the number of orders for our lenses is still above our manufacturing capabilities, and especially the capabilities of our research and development department. What the CEO is clearly saying there is they understand that there's business opportunities in getting into the Nikon Z and the Canon R mount. They get it, they've got it, they probably want to do it, they want to do it, they're interested in doing it because that's where you're going to get more revenue if you can sell more lenses. But right now they've got sales way higher than they can keep up with from a manufacturing perspective, and of course when designing lenses for new mounts or perhaps even adapting current lenses for new mounts, you still need to do some R&D. So what's exciting about this for me is it's on Sigma's radar. The CEO has made this statement, so it is from the proverbial horse's mouth, and I think they will be coming. So that is very exciting news for both Nikon and Canon users. Let's jump into the fact that Nikon has announced that for accessories and lenses, they will not be providing international warranties anymore. Now, this to me is something that we can talk about in the context of common sense as well as break it down by numbers. So I'm going to do a bit of both. Firstly, I've done a reasonable amount of reading, and from what I can understand, no other camera manufacturer offers international warranties. So Nikon was the only company still doing it. So that is fact number one. All Nikon are doing here is meeting the overall market. Secondly, there are a lot of moving parts at play when you talk about warranties in different countries. So this announcement, what it basically means is you used to be able to buy a lens anywhere and then the warranty would work globally. Just as an aside, I'm not sure any of my lenses did that, and if they did do that, I never knew that. I'd like to give you an example of the way warranties now work in Australia. In Australia, I'm not sure when this changed. It was about 10 years ago, but warranties are in essence not the way a consumer applies for something to be repaired. In the good old days, it simply was, your warranty is 1 year old, that's it. 1 year and 1 day, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover it. In Australia, the law is now a little bit different, and we have what's called a consumer guarantee. And I am reading this from the government website. I can see here that it is 10 years ago, almost to the day. The consumer guarantee on products and services since the 1st of January 2011. The following consumer guarantee on products and services apply. Products must be of acceptable quality, that is, safe, lasting, with no fault, look acceptable, do all things someone would normally expect them to do. Now, the upshot of all of this is ultimately warranties don't specifically apply in this country. The way it works is basically what is a fair and reasonable expectation of the expected life of a product. So for instance, if you buy a camera, having a 1-year warranty in this country, it's irrelevant. It's basically, you can go back to the company and go, look, I've spent $3,500 on a Canon EOS R. Something has gone wrong with it. I expect it to last longer than 18 months. Please repair it. So it comes down to what is considered fair and reasonable, and ultimately that ends up being a conversation between you and the manufacturer or you and the store. But at the end of the day, warranties don't apply. Now, one of the most obvious examples of that is Apple here in this country. I can't speak for any other parts of the world, but Apple, full well knowing what Australian consumer law is now in this country, which changed on January 1st, 2011, is you get a 1-year warranty on your product, on the box. And Apple will try and upsell you 2 more years and make a little bit of extra money. But the reality is, if you go into an Apple store, up until something like 2 or 3 years, Apple will still help you, regardless of the fact that your warranty has expired. You know, that piece of paper which isn't actually really relevant in this country anymore. And they do it happily. And why do they do it happily? Because they full well know that if you spend $3,500 on an iMac and it's just sitting on your desk, it doesn't move for 2.5 years and then it suddenly stops working. Well, Apple full well know it's fair and reasonable for you and I to think that a product that you've spent a lot of money on that just sits there really should last at least 3 years, not 1 like the warranty. Now, there are some downsides, I suppose. You could say, well, what's fair and reasonable? Who decides? The way I feel about this is it's more than the 1 year. Now, in Australia, Nikon currently give us 2 years as long as we register our products. But I would still argue that if I'm buying a professional grade lens and I've treated it perfectly, I would expect it to definitely last more than 2 years. So anyway, that's what it looks like in Australia. I have read that also in other countries they now have a similar sort of approach to things, that it's not, the warranties really is not the fundamental application of whether you get a repair or not. It's actually consumer law and what is accepted as reasonable. So let's go back to Nikon and the problems that they're going through in regards to people going, oh my God, we don't have these warranties anymore. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons, but I want to now go to some of the data. Firstly, let's talk about the grey market. Now, the grey market is one of the biggest issue. It's a massive issue for companies in each region. For example, let's say you can buy a camera cheaper in Thailand and then someone puts 10 of them in their suitcase, brings them here, and then what grey market means is they might sell them without any of the local taxes and they might have been able to buy them cheaper for whatever reasons. Now, there's lots of reasons, because when you buy, let's say you do buy a camera in Australia, part of that sale is covering the cost of infrastructure, the cost of marketing, the cost of wages, the cost of head office. There's all these different costs to run Nikon in Australia. Now, because of the way the world works, employing people and having sites here like a premises, it costs more money than in other parts of the world. So the product is more expensive. The grey market product sidesteps all of those local costs as well as the local taxes, and that's how it's able to be sold cheaper. So it makes sense to me that grey market products are not acknowledged in their non-country of origin, because it hasn't had the extra money spent on it to cover the infrastructure locally. And this is just how it works. The world is not one massive economic system where the cost of a Big Mac or the cost of a can of Coke is the same. If the cost of everything was the same globally, then it is easier to run global warranties. But the reality is the costs are not the same. So that's grey market problem number one. But you might go, well, I've lived in the UK, I bought my stuff in the UK, I've come to Australia, I want to have it repaired. Well, it's still repairable, it's just that you might have to pay for it. And it's really for that same set of reasons. You've paid a different price and it all becomes just a bit difficult to work out all of the differences. Now, I get that we would still like to have our stuff under warranty, and in that sort of situation where you've legitimately moved and you've come to a new country and you've set up shop and you're living your new life here and you'd like to be able to have your warranties still stand fast, I get it. And I suppose that's less than perfect. I'd like to reiterate that's how it is for all camera manufacturers. But let's talk about some ways around it and some of the hard data which would show us that it's really not that big a deal. Firstly, let's say warranties are, in your country, 1 year or 2 years. What percentage of equipment that you own today is actually still existing in its warranty part of its life? The reality is, the majority of my equipment, probably the majority of your equipment, is more than 1 or 2 years old. So it doesn't even apply. It doesn't even apply. So let's say at any given time, and now is a bit of an unusual period because we're changing between, in the case of Nikon, F-mount and Z, and it's a massive shift and a lot of people are moving en masse. But outside of this change period that we're in at the moment, where thousands and thousands of people are changing system for perhaps the first time in 10, 20 or 30 years, outside of that, most of us might buy 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of equipment per year, max. And so very quickly, your equipment ripples out of warranty. So that's fact number one. Fact number two is, I would gently and respectfully reach out there and say to everybody, okay, so how often, like what percentage of people and lenses ever have a problem within their first 1 or 2 years? And I'm going to hazard a guess that it's not 10%, and it might not even be 1%. And it might be an even lower number than 1% of lenses that go out there require some form of manufacturer fault repair in the first 1 to 2 years. Now, I've needed lenses repairs because of user error, and that's fine, that's completely different. But very rarely, if never, I'm just trying to cast my mind back and I cannot think of a lens. So not only do we not really make a lot of lens warranty manufacturer fault claims, I would suspect it is below 1% of lenses. But then of that 1%, what percentage of them are moving around the world a lot? And the reality is, of all the lenses in the world, probably 1% of those 1% are moving around the world. Now 1% of 1%, I think off the top of my head, that's 1 in 10,000. So statistically speaking, perhaps this affects 1 in 10,000 lenses that have moved from country A to country B, do end up having a manufacturer's fault and then need to be repaired. That's just looking at it statistically, and I think it's probably reasonably accurate. But I'd love you to tell me how you've gone. You know, if you've owned 5 lenses, maybe you've had 1. If you've owned 1 that's required a manufacturer's repair in under 1 to 2 years. Or maybe you've had 10, you've had 1, or 20, you've had 1, or 30, you've had 1. Please, I'd love to collect that data, because I really don't think ultimately this is a very big deal. And ultimately, what Nikon have stated, it's because warranties around the world are not the same. And as we've illustrated here in Australia, and I think it's happening in Europe, as I said before, now consumer law is overtaking, or consumer rights is overtaking what the traditional warranty actually covers. Whereas I suspect that wouldn't be the case in some countries. And just to go back to the grey market, I think, was it last year or the year before, and I think it was Brazil, it was somewhere in South America, where Nikon had shut up shop because the grey market, just all the cameras being purchased were coming in via the grey market. And ultimately what that means is no locally provided cameras from Nikon Brazil were being purchased, which means there was no money going to Nikon Brazil to pay for staff and pay for everything that was happening. So the grey market killed the capacity for Nikon to be there. The grey market is mostly really about buying product through unofficial channels. Now, yes, it might save us 20% or 30%, but I'm not sure it's worth it in the long run. I personally like to, even though I haven't made claims, I actually want to support Nikon in this country. I want to support them so they're here, so that the Nikon professional services are still running, so I can borrow equipment if I want to ensure that the Nikon cameras are still sold in this country, and to ensure that there are official places for it to be repaired. And it's just appropriate to spend the money and for local stores to continue to run. I don't want to buy a camera from someone that I can't see or can't find, or might even be shipping it from some other country. It's super important for me to have all those relationships here locally for all those reasons that I said. So don't worry about this too much. I don't ultimately think it's going to affect very many of us in the real world. And it doesn't mean your gear can't be repaired. It just means you might have to pay for it if you decide to move countries. And to reiterate, I never knew this existed. Did I even have it? I'm going to have to go check my warranty papers to see if all my previous lenses had international warranties. But they didn't include it on the bodies. And I haven't thought about why that might be the case. But it's always been the case that bodies need to be bought in the country that you want to have them warrantied. So everybody, ultimately I would say don't worry too much about this. Statistically, it won't affect hardly any of us. So it's not something that's a big deal, I don't think. The next piece of news that I wanted to touch on is that Capture One have started letting us Capture One people know that Z7II and Z6II support will be arriving before the end of January 2021. So that's just in the next couple of weeks. Super exciting news, because I did notice in my last video that I said, oh, this is a Z6 camera, when actually it was the Z6II. But I have been changing the metadata in order for Capture One to be able to work with the raw files, and thus even confusing myself. So I'll be looking forward to the day when I can put a Z6II file into Capture One and it stays a Z6II file. Very good. All right, well, that is all the news for today. It has been spectacular to see you. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments about any of that stuff, I'd love to hear it. Especially, I'd love to hear about any lens warranties, returns that you've had, manufacturer-related returns in the first 1 or 2 years of you owning your lens. I'd love to hear about that. How many lenses have you had, and how many have required that in the first 1 or 2 years? That'd be super interesting. All right, so good to see you. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time here, I would love to see you again. So please subscribe, please share, it makes us all smarter, and please like, it really helps out the video. And if you'd like to watch a little bit more right now, just down there is over 280 episodes you can watch.